Hello, everyone. I'm Barbara Ham-Lee. Up next on Another View, Living History. Believe it or not, it was only 50 years ago that the College of William and Mary fully integrated with the admission of the first African-American residential students. Their names are Lynn Briley, Janet Brown, and Karen Ely. We'll hear from two of them today about their experiences being the first Blacks to live on campus, and from Dr. Jacquelyn McLendon on the year-long commemoration of this historical event. It's an Another View history lesson, and it's next, so please stay tuned.
Discussing today's topics from an African American perspective, this is Another View.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Another View. I'm Barbara Ham-Lee. Just want to let you know that today's show is Facebooked live. I probably didn't say that correctly, but if you go to our Facebook page, Another View on Facebook, you will see us live today as we talk with some pioneers in the studio today. I'm so excited to have these folks with me. It was 1967 when three young women, Lynn Briley, Janet Brown, and Karen Ely, were admitted to the College of William and Mary as students and allowed to live in a dorm on campus. They were the first African-American residential students as well as the first African-American female students. What was life like for them? Did they realize at the time that they were making history? And how did this experience shape the rest of their lives? Joining us to talk about it are two of the pioneers, Lynn Briley. Hi, Lynn. How you doing?
Hello, Barbara. I'm glad to be here.
Thank you so much for joining me. I so appreciate it. Janet Brown, how are you?
I'm doing well, thank you.
And thanks for driving down from Northern Virginia to be with us today. And Dr. Jacquelyn McLendon, who is the Emeritus Professor in English and also chair of the committee developed to commemorate this historic event. How are you doing?
I'm doing fine, thank you.
That is Grace. And so you know what? Grace, who is our social media manager here, just sent me a note, and she says, we're live on Facebook today, and I can say it again at our reset. So there you go. Okay. We are live. But Jacquelyn, I want to start with you because as the person who's putting together the year-long celebration of this event, commemoration of this event, before 1967, take us back a bit to what was happening with the College of William and Mary in terms of race relations, because it's had a, let's say, storied or troubled past.
Well, I'll preface this by saying that I'm still doing research myself, and I started doing some of this research as I became more involved with the 50th anniversary. And so one of the things that I really have to refer to is the Lemon Project, which we've done several shows on. Exactly. The Lemon Project. But remind people what that is.
And
in a few years back, and I think maybe 5 or 6 years now, and it may be longer than that. Bob Ings and Terry Myers and Jody Allen started this program that the college funded, and what they were looking into was the college's holding of enslaved people during that particular time. The project is named for an enslaved man, and all they knew was Lemon.
Lemon was his name, right?
And so that's how they got the name for it. And what they've done is to look back at that time, to gather that history. There are programs that are going on. They wanted to look at and they wanted to involve current students in it. So it's been an effort to look at those and just kind of try to compensate for some of what went on. And there are symposiums held every year. There's Kente ceremony for African-American students, or Black students, I'll say, because that's pretty much the term that I use, because it's more inclusive. And porch talks. There are a number of programs that have come out of the Lemon Project.
So, but the College of William and Mary itself started as an all-male
It was
school,
all male,
and
yes.
then in the there were a lot of things that happened, and we will deal with that later. But in the 1960s, there started to be legislation and laws put into place that said that higher education had to start to integrate.
Right.
Is that correct?
And and when you mentioned that it was all male, one of the things that is happening is that the year after this will be the 100-year anniversary of women being admitted to the college. So we really, with the African American or Black presence, we start talking about the Lemon Project. But that is not sort of where we are with this celebration. What happens immediately before this is that when all of this legislation is happening, we do have the first admitted Black male student
Who was a graduate
student in the School of Education, Hulan Willis, and he came in 1951 in March, I believe. And then just months after that, Edward Augustus Travis came in the School of Law. So I think August of 1951, he came in. Now, for years, I think we thought that Hulan Willis was the first graduate, but it was actually Edward Travis. He graduated a couple of years before. And so those students were there. And then in 1955, we have the first Black woman to be admitted to the college, Miriam Carter. And Miriam Carter tried in a number of schools there at William and Mary, the School of Education, and in one of the historical, Olahumdru. I'm pronouncing that wrong, but the the organization that does all the history, and she tried to get in several places, and she was denied in a number of places, and she was finally admitted into the School of Law, where she apparently didn't do well. And my feeling is because she didn't get in where she wanted to get in.
Where her passion was.
Yeah. And so she only stayed there for a year. Okay. So she was the first admitted woman, but she was also graduate student. But she didn't
none
finish.
of these people at this point are at the undergraduate level.
There are none at the undergraduate level.
Okay.
In 1950... Let's see, it's 1963, we get the first Black undergraduate student, a male by the name of Oscar Blayton. And I think he's a junior, but Oscar Blayton was the first to be admitted as an undergraduate student.
Okay, well, let me fast forward to 1967 because, Lynn and Janet, that's when you are. I'd love to hear what was going on in your homes in terms of the decision that was made that you would want to go to William and Mary. And I'll start with you, Lynn Briley.
The same decisions that go in the homes of students today, financial. My parents were looking for a institution that did not cost a lot of money. My first choice was Howard University in Washington, D.C. It was a little bit expensive then.
You're from Portsmouth,
I'm
right?
from Portsmouth.
So you're from
born
right
and raised. Went to Norcom High School.
Okay.
And so I wanted to go to an historically Black university, but I couldn't afford it, and I didn't get a scholarship to Howard. So the money factor played an important part in my decision. But I also talked to some guidance counselors at school, and during that time, I think our counselors were guiding students to traditionally white institutions because the doors were opening, and they were giving us some suggestions. The College of William and Mary came up as one of those options. We researched it. Most people didn't know that it was a public institution. A lot of people thought William and Mary was a private school. It was a public institution. The tuition was manageable, and I just made the decision. I made the decision really on a band trip. I was in the marching band, and we had a parade somewhere in Williamsburg, and I saw this school, and it was sort of idyllic. The trees and the grass, it looked fine, and I began to pursue the idea of going to the College of William and Mary. So I submitted my application along with my picture, which was required.
They required
at the
pictures
time.
then.
and I was accepted.
Okay. And Janet, what was going on in your household? What was the conversation?
Well, there wasn't much conversation. I had just had to find some money to go to school because in my household there was no money to go anywhere. And no one in my family had been to a 4-year college. My sister had been to a 2-year, but there was just no money. My father had died when I was 12, so my mother had 4 kids, and she was doing what she could do.
Doing what she needed to do. Absolutely.
Exactly. And so when I was in high school and wanting to go to college, I knew I had to find a way. And for me, it was really my finding the way. My school didn't help me any. My guidance counselor, in fact, told me, just go to Norfolk State because you wouldn't succeed anywhere else. Not that Norfolk State's a bad school,
No, right.
But
there was steering.
And there was no money, and I needed money. And so the timing for me was right. And you talked about the legislation earlier, that because of the 1964 Civil Rights Act, it was then required that the doors open. And there was lots of financial federal funds attached to allowing students, minority students, particularly black students, into predominantly white universities. And so I knew about William and Mary. I knew its reputation. I knew it was a good school. I knew it was tough to get into. But I tried anyway. And like Lynn, I submitted my application and sent my picture, which didn't tell them a whole lot.
They had to guess.
But they had to go by the background of the school. And so then I was accepted, and with a very good financial aid package.
So did you guys know at that time that you were going to be the first to live on campus and to be the first, to fully integrate William and Mary?
No, we had no idea.
We didn't know we were first anything.
We came to student orientation. Karen and I were from Norcom High School in Portsmouth, and Janet from Huntington High School, Newport News. Yes. And we came to orientation. We had unpacked, moved into the dorm, said goodbye to our families, and I guess we went to orientation, and we looked around, and we looked for other students who looked like us, and there were none. And then we realized.
Do you remember how big the class was?
It was a huge class.
Yeah, it was a very big class.
Like
I don't
900
remember.
people or something. It was a very large class. Yeah.
Wow. What did you think? I can imagine having been either an only or the first in many aspects of my own life. I'm curious as to kind of what was going through your minds, if you can remember. I know you said it was 50 years ago.
50 years ago.
But if you can remember, kind of your thoughts about what your experience was about to be like. Janet.
I'm sure we talked about it, recognizing that we were the only ones. But even at orientation, we didn't see any others at orientation. I don't think we really still thought there may have been other upperclassmen or something. Someone somewhere.
The orientation was all freshmen.
Yes, just only freshmen.
Yeah,
so we
freshmen.
still didn't get the full impact until, classes actually started, and we're going through the registration process, and you meet your professors, you meet all the people in the dorms, you walk around the campus, you go to the cafeteria, and so it took a while to really hit us that we really were the only ones.
So now I read that you guys were roommates, all three of you.
Well, they put us together, I think.
Well, here's my question, and Jackie, I'm going to come to you for this, because from everything that I read, there was from articles in the Flat Hat all the way through other scholarly papers and so forth. It said over and over that William and Mary always said we never kept records of the race of our students or the gender of our students. And so I'm not understanding, how did these three women wind up as roommates if they had no clue who was coming?
I don't know why you came to me with that one, because I think it's pretty obvious that and the school does keep records. I mean, one of the things that you can do now is to find the alums by race and by gender and so on. So they have kept records. I think it may have been an embarrassment in some ways to have to admit that that was obviously done purposely. I mean, the only three African Americans who are there end up in the same room in the same, in this building. So, yeah, I think that wasn't by accident.
Well, there was a selection process. Karen and I were from the same high school. We selected one another as roommates.
Okay.
So we thought,
So
we knew we were going to be roommates.
So how did Janet get
We met
there?
Janet
on day one.
On day one, we met Janet when we reported to our room.
Yeah,
Oh, wow.
So we thought it was just going to be
the two of
me
you.
and Karen, the two of us. And then
That's interesting.
here's Janet. Then we found out she was from Huntington High School in Newport News. We said, See, they knew Huntington High School
what
was
was the
an
name of the
African
dorm?
American. What was Jefferson dorm?
Jefferson dorm. And you guys were in the basement?
We
I
were in the
understand.
basement.
Were there other rooms in the basement?
Oh, yeah.
Yes, there were.
okay.
And most people.
That was a newly renovated part
Yeah,
of the.
it
That
was-
was the best part of the dorm, actually.
Yeah, when
okay,
most people
okay.
hear the basement, they said, that's where they put you three. But the basement had recently been renovated, had larger rooms, and it could accommodate, our room could accommodate 3 young ladies, when the other rooms were for two.
Were for two.
And
Okay.
I had that reaction when I first met them, and I heard about it, and I said, "Oh, you were in the basement."
Yeah, because
And-
when you read that
yeah,
without having the context,
exactly.
and that's why I wanted to ask. 440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240 are the numbers to call to join our conversation. Are you an alum of William and Mary? And if you are, what do you think about the fact that it's only been 50 years since full integration at that university? 440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240. You can also post questions on our Facebook page. We are doing Facebook Live, and so we'd love to hear from you. We did get a post. One person wants to know. She said that she had to submit her photo with her application in 2001, and wonders if that's still required.
When I was
McLendon.
when I was full time and I was doing freshman advising, it was required. Now, since I retired in 2013, whether it stopped since then, I don't know. But for the entire time that I taught at William and Mary, they were required to submit photos.
So Janet and Lynn, when we were talking a little bit before the show, and you guys said to me, you know what, this was 50 years ago, and we didn't know then that we were going to be pioneers. So we didn't really record a lot of stuff in terms of mentally. But when you think back on your experience, what stands out to you as being an only or the first in terms of race? Anything
Well,
at
what
all?
stands out to me is the
This is Lynn Briley
isolation.
speaking. Isolation.
Isolation. If it were not for Janet and Karen, I would have been the loneliest person. I would not have stayed. I probably would not have stayed. We were each other's support and companions. And I think that outside of the dorm setting, we didn't share any classes.
Did you all have different majors?
Different
All three of
majors.
you had different
I don't recall. I think there was a huge lecture in government or history or something. Maybe Karen and I shared a class. But we shared no classes. We had different majors. I was the only African American in all of my classes for all 4 years.
And what was that like? I mean, did you get called on in class? Did you feel like you could contribute? I'm just trying to get a sense of how it went.
I don't remember that much. I know that I took my mother's advice and I sat in the front of the room. I was on the front row of every class. I didn't want to be missed. Not that they could have. But if I was going to respond, I wanted the professor to notice me. And if the professor was going to ask me a question, I wanted to be
And did you
respond.
have African American professors?
No,
None.
None.
there were none.
There were none on campus then.
I had a visiting professor from Hampton University. I don't remember her name. She taught African American literature. And that was my first real course in African American literature. And I fell in love with African American women writers as a result of that class. Now, we had, in high school, of course, we studied African American history and some literature in our English classes, but that was my first intense class. But she was a visiting professor only from Hampton University.
So she was not on campus full
She
time.
was not, no.
So Janet, what about for you in terms of your classes and in terms of your experience as a student? Yeah.
Well, there were no black people in my classes either. And for the most part, in my classes, people thought they still didn't have a black person in their class.
If you haven't picked up on this yet, Janet is the light-skinned woman. Let's put it that way.
And what was interesting for me is that in some instances when some of the students would find out that I was black, they were more offended by the fact that they thought I wasn't, but now I was, because they thought I was trying to deceive them in some way.
Oh.
And so I would get backlash for that, not because I looked black. It was because I didn't.
And so they would say, you should have told us?
Well, the thing I remember distinctly, one person saying in one situation was she could have fooled me. And I almost would say, well, I did.
440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240 are the numbers to call to join our conversation. We're speaking with two of the three women to integrate these College of William and Mary by becoming the first residential students. We are talking with Lynn Briley and Janet Brown, and also Dr. Jacquelyn McLendon, Emerita Professor of English at the College of William and Mary, and she's also put together a year-long commemoration of this event. My name is Barbara Ham Lee. We have another question from Facebook. Wanted to know, if your guests feel that they were treated differently by professors and staff, and if so, how?
We're often asked that question, and I really have nothing to compare it with. I didn't feel treated differently. I know that I was a struggling student. Mm-hmm. I didn't feel comfortable to ask for advice or assistance from any professors. I was felt somewhat isolated, but during my struggles, I just hit the books more intense. I went to summer school to retake classes or make up for classes, and my focus was totally on my studies. To maintain a C average was basically what I was trying to do. And I never thought that was what my goal was, because, you're an honor student in high school and, you're graduating the top 10 of your class, and you hit this academic wall in which you begin to struggle just to keep up. So I never felt that any of my professors had any animosity toward. They may have, but it was never overt. Not for me, not my experience. And
what
maybe
about for
Janet?
No, I didn't feel it as though there was any animosity either. And we all were working hard. And I've thought back on this. I think we thought we were struggling because maybe we weren't as prepared, or maybe we were struggling and not doing well, and we didn't want to make it appear that was the expectation, so we were going to fail. But I've thought about William and Mary is an extremely academically challenging institute for everyone. So there were probably many students who were struggling just like we were, but we were focused only on ourselves. And so we knew of students who actually didn't come back after the first semester or the first year. But still, I think for us, we felt a greater obligation to ourselves and to our families not to fail.
Did you feel the pressure from your own race in terms of having to be successful because you were the first at William and Mary?
Yes, I think that when people ask us the question, do you feel that you were tasked to represent your race? Mm-hmm. Yes, we did. And that's one of the reasons why we were determined not to fail.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Another Facebook question comes from, how did the other students relate to you? They wanted to know. Well, one person said you could have fooled me, huh, Janet?
Yeah, but that was really the exception. In our dorm, for example, everyone we had fun in the dorm. We made friends. In fact, we made plans to meet with some folks that were on our hall, next month, just to get together for lunch. And so there were people we became very close with. Mm-hmm. But for the most part, we didn't have that experience that I had. And Karen had some things that happened, and Lynn probably did too. But those were the exception, really.
Exceptions to the rule.
Right. And like Lynn said, they pretty much ignored us, I think.
When and someone else wanted to know, have you guys remained friends throughout the years, or did this commemoration bring you back together?
Actually, 2011 brought us back together. There was a special ceremony in 2011 commemorating the 40th anniversary of our class. And as part of that, Earl Granger from the college and Sean Glover, who's diversity chief
diversity
I get their
officer.
titles.
Yes.
Okay.
They put together this program in 2011. Karen and Lynn had reconnected, but I had lost total contact and hadn't seen either one of them since the late 70s.
Wow.
And so it was almost 40 years since we had reconnected. But since then, we've made an effort to stay
In touch.
Yeah.
So what are you doing professionally now, and how did this experience help you to get to your individual professions? I'll start with you, Lynn.
Well, now I'm happily retired. When I got my degree in English from the College of William and Mary, my desire was to go to journalism school. I wanted to be a journalist. I don't know but I like English, you see. But when I came back home, I had an opportunity to teach. And I started a career in education immediately after I came, 1971 or 72. And I stayed in Portsmouth Public Schools from teaching English to a school administrator, and I retired as principal of ICU Norcom High School. I was the first principal to be an alumnus of the school, which was an honor. And so I retired in 2012. Very rare to have a career that long in one place. But now I'm part-time adjunct instructor at TCC, just a couple of days a week.
So education, you stayed in.
I stayed in education.
Stayed in education. And Janet, what was your profession?
Well, I started out as an elementary school teacher, and I taught actually 7 years in the Williamsburg, James City County school system. And then I got married to a person who was in the Army and moved to Germany for 3 years. And there was not able to get a teaching position, so I entered federal civil service. And so I spent 35 years in civilian service working for the Department of the Army in mostly strategy plans and policy directorate at the Pentagon. And I retired in 2014 from that.
So did your experiences at William and Mary, did they help or hinder you in terms of your careers ultimately?
It helped me tremendously because working with the military as a professional female, because I worked with mostly combat arms guys who, when I started, women were not allowed into combat arms. And so the only females were clerical or administrative people. So a professional female was different.
Was rare.
So
But you were used to being rare.
I would say I was often another first at something. And so having been the first at William and Mary, I think was a lot harder than being the first in some of these other places. So in a way, it prepared me. I wasn't afraid of doing something that hadn't been done before or being a place I hadn't been before. So I would think, in retrospect, it did prepare me.
What about you?
Also, yeah, of course it prepares you. First of all, you're getting a degree from a very prestigious college, and that helps. When people hear the name William and Mary or see William and Mary on your job application, the door opens a little wider. And I knew that. So even as a school administrator, I would try to influence and channel high school students to a good liberal arts education at William and Mary. And I have students who have left Portsmouth Public Schools and have done very well here, African American students. And so, yes, it helps.
We've got a lot of phone calls here, so I'm going to say, let's talk to Bill in Chesapeake. Hi, Bill, you on the air.
Hey, Barbara, love your show.
Thank you.
I'm a 62 graduate, William and Mary, went from there right into the Marine Corps, and did my DNA when Oprah did hers. I grew up thinking I was Choctaw Indian. That's what the family said, and I found out I'm not Choctaw Indian at all, but I'm Northern European and Sub-Saharan African. Mm-hmm. And I've often wondered if I'd have put that on my application at William and Mary. I was the head cheerleader and the president of the pep club. I rode the pony Wampo and dressed up with my Indian kilt and all my my garb. And I've always wondered. There were no black students there, and I've always wondered, had I known and had checked that box, which I surely would have then had I known, I wonder if I would have even gotten in. So anyway, I teach English at ODU. My wife does too. I'm an adjunct. She's a full-time professor. And we love our diversified classrooms. It's absolutely wonderful.
Thank you, Bill, for the call. We really appreciate it. What do you think, ladies? Would he have gotten in, Dr. McLendon?
I doubt it.
If it was prior to 1964,
right.
Probably not.
Probably not.
Probably not.
There were Asian Americans who got in early. Art Matsu was the first Asian American, and he was on the sports teams. And I don't remember the year that he was in, but it was much earlier than these women were there. But it didn't. But so it may have the Choctaw part might have helped, but the African American
would not have helped at all. Let's talk to Dr. Carl in Norfolk. Hello, Dr. Carl. You're on the air.
Thanks for taking my call, Barbara. I'm not going to stay long. I just wanted to say that the one person whose name I have not heard was Dr. Ridley, who was my professor. He was head of the Department of Psychology, and that was also a landmark. The first time they'd accepted, I believe, someone as a graduate. And perhaps your guests are familiar with Dr. Ridley.
Dr. who?
Dr. Ridley, she said. And he was
He was head of the Department of Psychology at Virginia State.
Head of the Department of Psychology at Virginia State. But you're saying he was a graduate from William and Mary?
Only at the doctoral level, not at the undergraduate level.
It's not a name I'm familiar with yet, but
okay. Well, as they continue to do research, this will help you to be able to identify some other people. Thank you so much, Dr. Carl, for the call. We appreciate that. Let's go to Heather in Virginia Beach. Hi, Heather. You're on the air.
Hi, Barbara, and I just want to congratulate these women on a wonderful achievement and a degree from a prestigious state school in Virginia. And my question, I'm just curious, were there extracurricular activities that you had access to or opportunities, willingness to participate in?
Janet, you want to start with?
I didn't participate in anything extracurricular. I mean, some of the intramural sports, the things I did. Karen was a member of the chorus, and she did that for a number of years. But Lynn and I didn't.
I didn't participate in any extracurricular activities. It's not that we were restricted from them. We were just
busy
in the library.
Those classes were hard, weren't they?
I didn't have time for extracurricular. I was trying to make the grade, per se.
So
I think that
go ahead, Dr.
just to mention the Black Student Organization, though, I think was in some ways I would consider that extracurricular, and that was organized during the time that these women were there. And the founding president was Dr. Warren Buck. And so that was maybe 1969 that organization, and they were members of that.
Members of the Black Student Union. Well, I was getting ready to ask you, did you mentor more African-American students as they came in the later years?
Yes. As more students came in, we began to feel the camaraderie and the need for more support. And that's when the idea of the Black Student Organization came about. Warren Buck, who was a graduate student at the time, African-American, he was a pretty radical guy at the time. Remember, these were the 60s. And we wanted to organize the Black students just for support, mentorship, and we did. We were allowed to do that. And one of our greatest achievement as an organization of Black students was to we protested the playing of the song Dixie at sports events and the waving of Confederate flags, and it worked because I think since that day it doesn't happen anymore. So in a public
in public
forum.
Right, exactly. Janet, you want to add to that?
No, I would just want to say that, and aside from the Black Student Organization, where we probably we spent the most of the time once it was organized, occasionally we would be invited to different fraternity parties or something. We would go occasionally, and there were people in the community that we had met through our work in Colonial Williamsburg. We worked there summers, and so there was some social activities with that, but again, even with all of that, we were still very much focused on our academics.
So what about dating? Did you date interracially? Or
No, not at all.
And no,
I didn't
nobody
date in
even
high
asked you to
school.
know. You didn't date in high school either.
I had very strict parents.
Well, like I said, the people we met in the communities, and most of them were men. But they were friends. They weren't boyfriends. They were just friends who were boys. And so we would just kind of hang out with them and just, do different things. But there was nothing. There was no romantic relationship whatsoever. So
that was going. So as you look at the struggles that a lot of HBCUs are currently having, as you read about, and this is for all of you, the debate that still happens over whether or not HBCUs are necessary or not, and knowing what your experience was within a predominantly white university, what do you think? I mean, is there still a place for Virginia State and for, North Carolina A&T State University and others, Bennett College, my alma mater? Is there still a place for them, or should we all be mixing together? Dr.
I think
McLendon, I'll start with you.
Absolutely, there's a place for them. The problem is when you're forced to go to a particular place. I think one of the things that happens with HBCUs is that they get kind of a bad rap because, often there's not enough money and parents. I've had students tell me that their parents didn't want them to go to HBCUs because they felt that they wouldn't get the same kind of education they would get at a place like William and Mary. But I do think that that's not the case. There are really fine schools. I think if people want to go to those schools, they should have the schools for them to go to. I really believe that. On William and Mary's campus, there's, we now have Africana Studies, which means that we have now moved into an area where it seems as though we're separating these kinds of courses and that sort of thing, but it isn't. It's a necessary addition to what we already have, and I think the HBCUs are the same. They're necessary additions to places that are predominantly white.
But when you hear, and you made the statement earlier, Lynn, when you said, people see College of William and Mary on your resume, that's a big deal. I mean, and it whether it was the stellar education or not, people in their mind say that this is the way that is, versus another school where they may say, well, maybe the reputation is not quite as good.
Well, that's historical. I mean, you talk about the second oldest public institution in the country. You were founded before the country. Second only to Harvard. That's a lot of prestige around that institution, and they've had reputation to have a very stellar liberal arts program. But so are the HBCUs. I mean, you can't beat Howard or Hampton, or if you can name them, Bennett, whatever. Right. So people should have the options. If you're comfortable in your HBCU and you have people like to go because of family tradition. I mean, you should have that option. If you want to go to the traditional white institutions, you should have that option also. You go where you
feel comfortable.
Where you fit and feel comfortable. John joins us from Williamsburg. Hi, John. You're in the air.
Hello. I taught one of your students. In the spring of 1970, I taught Janet Brown in a linguistics class at William and Mary.
What's your last name, John?
I beg your pardon?
What's your last name?
Conley.
I remember him.
You remember Professor Conley?
I do remember him, yes.
I can probably fill in a few of the pieces that have to do with that period of time. One of the students mentioned a professor from Hampton who came and taught as a visiting professor at William and Mary.
Uh-huh.
And her name was Nancy McGee. I think she's deceased
She's passed
now,
away.
but she was the chair of the English department at Hampton at that time. And I actually exchanged with her and went down and taught for a semester at Hampton. And she taught as an African American professor at William and Mary. It wasn't until about 3 or 4 years later that we hired Trudier Harris,
1973.
who was the first full-time African American faculty member at William and Mary. But I remember Janet, and
Was she a good student?
she was a very solid, good student, and it was a fascinating time. Warren Buck, who you've mentioned, actually was the catcher on my intramural softball team at that time. But anyway, I just wanted to say hello.
I
hello.
appreciate that. Thank you so much for the call.
from
We
you.
appreciate
Thank
that.
you.
Okay. All right, bye-bye.
So 1973, the year before I graduated from high school, was the first African American professor.
She was the first
Full-time.
tenure track,
Tenure
and
track.
she received tenure there. So she stayed from 1973 to 1979, and she got tenure. And her name is Dr. Trudier Harris, and she teaches now at the University of Alabama. She's had a few careers. She's coming during this next year, so she's going to be a prominent part of the celebration.
Speaking of the celebrations, tell us some of the things that are going to be going on.
We have some wonderful events happening, and our opening convocation. Judge Thomas is going to be the speaker. Is a dynamic person. He was the first African American on the Virginia Supreme
I've
Court.
met him. He's a character.
He
You're
really
gonna-
is. And so,
Yeah, that's going to be wonderful.
Yeah, and so that's August 30th. That's the opening convocation. And then the next day, August 31st, we're having our actual opening reception at Swim Library. Carrie Cooper, who is the dean of the libraries, is the person who has graciously offered to hold this reception. And we have unveiling of a mural that was done by a class instructed by Steve Prince, who's an internationally known artist. And then that's going to be followed that same day. It's going to be followed by a woman from Colonial Williamsburg. She's an interpreter, Valerie Gray Holmes, and she's going to do an interpretation. And these three women have met with her, and they sort of know kind of what her work is about, and she's going to do something that has to do with their being there. So that's the opening. And then we have a string of things, and at some point I can provide a calendar.
And I was going to say, where should people go online to find out more information?
We will be launching our website very soon. It's www.wm.edu/50.
Okay.
And that's going to be launched within probably the next week or so.
And that'll have a listing
And that'll
of everything.
have everything that we're going to be doing.
And most of the activities are open to the public?
Almost everything is open to the public and free. There are a couple of things by invitation, simply because of space requirements. And then toward the end, and we've got wonderful people coming, like Nikki Giovanni is going to be a keynote at the next spring in our symposium. Dr. Janetta Cole is coming as the Martin Luther King speaker.
I'm
wonderful
hearing
people.
fabulous ideas for another view. I'm hearing fabulous people for us to have on for another view to promote this.
Yes.
So that is wonderful.
Yeah.
So let me ask you, Lynn and Janet, if you had to do it all over again, would you?
I wouldn't trade the experience for anything. Yeah. Just the
Why?
experience. Well, I grew up in a segregated residential community, went to a segregated church, went to a segregated school. Up until 1967, when I entered William and Mary, I had never had a class with a white student, never had a white teacher. You see, at some point, you need those experiences. And so I would not have traded it. I think I'm better off as a result of it. And now that we are communicating and making plans to have lunch with some of our dorm mates, that's 50 years later.
Wow.
That's a good experience.
That's going to be a great experience.
Yeah.
Oh, my goodness. Janet, would you do it again?
I would, and for the same reasons Lynn said. It just broadened my whole perspective on everything. Like she did, everything I did was a totally segregated environment, and so this gave me exposure to other kinds of people, other students, and experiences I just wouldn't have had. And because of having been there, I have been given opportunities to do other things that I never thought would have come my way had I not gone the education route that I took.
That you wound up going. And the last question for both of you. We got about 2 minutes left. So some alum on social media said that they were surprised that integration came so late to William and Mary. What do you think that based on its history, it kind of hit where it was supposed to, or should it have happened sooner?
Well, it happened in the same time period that many of the Southern colleges were integrating. I'm not sure that it's possible to say it should have happened sooner. I mean, it shouldn't have happened at the segregation shouldn't have happened at all. And so, but I think that this came right at the time when everybody else was integrating, and it probably made it a little bit easier because they weren't involved in these big moments of protest and
drama
that sort of thing. And they've mentioned that a number of times that it was more or less not as
contentious of a time or traumatic of a time.
Exactly. So
you all were on campus though when Dr. King was assassinated.
Yes.
Do you remember in a minute and a half? But was there any talk among the students? Was there a coming together of people? Janet?
I remember when it happened, and there were riots breaking out all around, and I remember a couple of the students coming into our room in the dorm and said, "Well, if there are riots here on campus, we're coming into your room," as if we were going to provide some sort of protection. And that, well, no, first off, they wouldn't have known we were there. And I think I said to them, "Well, if you want the room, you can have it because we're leaving." So,
I do remember. I remember being home. Must have been around spring break when Dr. King was assassinated. And so when I came back to college, I wore a black armband.
I remember the black armbands because I lived in Baltimore and we had to put them on our car and on our house.
Black armband, and I really don't remember if any kind of discussion precipitated from that. But that was my way of honoring Dr. King.
Well, it's been fascinating, ladies. Thank you all so much for joining us today. I really appreciate it. And we will be right back.
I'm with Marcellus, and you all are checking out Another View. Don't go anywhere. Check us out.
And welcome back. Local comedian Allison Moore keeps us laughing, whether she's opening for comic legend Sinbad or doing her own thing. But Moore's passion stretches far beyond tickling our funny bones. Next week, she's hosting a women's conference in Hampton focusing on empowerment. It's called Fearless because, as Moore shared with our Lisa Godley, being afraid is no laughing matter.
So, I've been a comedian all my life. I've just been getting paid last couple of years, right? So a couple people owe me money. That's what I say.
But Allison Moore is quick to point out that growing up, she was no class clown, just someone quick with a comeback.
What I have always been is fearless, which is another element that you need to be bold enough by yourself to stand on stage and commit to entertaining someone.
So when Allison decided to host her second Women's Empowerment Conference, that's what she named it, Fearless. The goal, to empower women to overcome the fear that might be holding them back and keeping them from becoming successful in the many roles they juggle each and every day. And she isn't one for sitting around and waiting for something to happen. Allison Moore makes it happen. Last April, Allison promoted and produced a show at NSU's Wilder Center featuring Sinbad. And guess who opened for him?
Sinbad was really big and known for his clean comedy.
Right.
And also Bill Cosby, but we're going to leave Bill alone for now. So, Sinbad, you stay over there. Keep your drinks. I'm not thirsty. I'm good. So Sinbad I'm like, how can I get this platform where people in Hampton Roads will know who I am? And I want the people who like clean comedy to know that I'm here. And so you do that by bringing one of the giants of clean comedy. I'm like, ladies, if your man wants you to, stay in shape, you do that. Work out, stay in shape. So your shape can be a brick house, a double wide trailer.
Oh, my.
It could be a Coca-Cola bottle, a gallon of milk. It doesn't matter the shape. You just stay in the one that you already in.
Allison's road to the stage isn't exactly what you'd call predictable. She earned a BA from Norfolk State University, a master's from George Washington University, and worked in the field of human resources before taking on the title comedian.
People are very surprised when they talk to me because I guess comedians are not necessarily walking around, Hampton Roads every day. And then my story looks a little bit different because even though I like to think I look 21, right? Please say I look 21.
You do.
It's my self-esteem. Thanks, Lisa.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you. I'm not. I'm 33. I'll be 34 this year. Married 13 years. I got 3 kids. I can't go chasing comedy like a 22-year-old can. People are like, oh, so you gonna move, girl? You gonna move to L.A.? Like, yeah, when you help me sell my house. And I already have me another one in L.A. with a job that my husband can transfer to.
Allison is what you'd call a clean comic, which means no sex talk or profanity.
This is no lie, Lisa. I have not had a show where at least one person did not come up to me and say, I didn't think you was going to be funny, girl, because I don't do clean comedy. Or men still say, you funny, to be a woman. It sounds like your mama never made you laugh. Like, never.
She says the best part of doing what she does is seeing the manifestation of her work.
I have to tell my brain to be funny. And so I spend a lot of time sitting down writing. I like comedians like Trevor Noah and just intelligent comedians. Now, he's very political and I'm not, but I like to think that I'm thoughtful. I mean, I do use real life situations, but I try to be as intelligent and representative of Black women. That's just a little bit different than maybe some stereotypical stuff. But I enjoy when I'm up there and I see the audience's reaction. Like, I take them in different places. Like, one of my first opening lines, especially if I'm doing a white club, is, I bet you when they said my name, you didn't think it was going to be me.
For Another View, I'm Lisa Godley.
And Allison Moore's Women's Empowerment Conference, titled Fearless, gets underway next Saturday, August the 12th, from 10 until 3 at the Spring Hill Suites on Power Plant Parkway in Hampton. For more information, visit More Laughing, that's MOORE laughing.com. And one of the ways to keep African American history alive is to share our stories. And you can share today's show with others by downloading the Another View podcast. We're on iTunes at anotherviewradio.org, at WHRV.org, or anywhere else you go for your podcast listening pleasure. We're on Facebook, so like us, and I'm on Twitter at Barbara Ham Lee. We also invite you to sign up for our eView newsletter, a once-a-week reminder of upcoming shows. Visit anotherviewradio.org to sign up. Next time on Another View, it's the Another View Roundtable, and boy, do we have a lot to talk about next week. Our theme music was composed and performed by Jay Sennett. Lisa Godley is our show producer. Victor Bowen is our audio engineer, and Trey Watson answered our phones. I'm Barbara Ham Lee. Thank you so very, very much for listening to Another View.